You couldn't get much of a bigger contrast than in Richmond anyway, between Slough and say the parking lot of the Save-On up on 5 Road. One is a place where all these birds get to eat and make nests and do their thing, and the other is a place where there's nothing but cars.
I don't want to live in Vancouver. I don't really want to live anywhere else. I can't think of anywhere else that I want to live.
I can hear people when they walk along the dike over there, and they're, you know, the little kids are saying, "Do people live in those places?" Do they? Yeah. And Dad says, "Yeah, they live there, you know," and because they couldn't imagine it because they're living in some suburban house with all the amenities, and it's a different lifestyle.
This village wouldn't exist without the Fraser River. This village was designed to be on the edge, to be in the transition between land and water. That's what this place is. It's a transitional place between water on the one side and land on the other, you know, and we're right in the middle between those two.
At one time in the slough, there was 37 gillnet boats, or fishing boats.
The river, the tide especially, sort of governs what you can and can't do. The tide's out, you can't get the boat out, you can't go out to enjoy the river physically. The river brings so much stuff in. It brings the wood to fix the path. Somebody upriver is careless with when they're repairing their docks and things, and the planks come down, so you just fish the planks out of the river to reuse on the path.
I once lived in New York City, which is a very different place than this, right in Greenwich Village, in the heart of the city, and I got very homesick for BC, and I came out here and started looking for just a nice place to live, sort of semi-detached, because I moved into a basement suite that was broken into regularly by the landlady. Anyway, and it was right downtown. So I started looking at these little places up and down the river and got to know some of the people here, and eventually got a call from the owner of this place, and he gave it to me.
There used to be probably 24 of us kids that used to play on the wharves and swim down there when the water was clean. We used to have just a good time, unbelievably good time.
Kids being raised here, they feel a little bit isolated because it's a mile and a half to the nearest bus and to their friends. But they walk out in the morning, they see the ducks swimming in the slough, or they see the beaver swim by, or they see the muskrat, like my youngest daughter, she could recognize the call of the kingfisher when she was 2 years old. She'd go, "There's a kingfisher," you know, like, yeah, she'd just hear it and know where it was. And the kids now don't tend to use the river as much as they should. My eldest daughter, when she was with me, she'd hop in the boat, one of the rowboats, and take it out in the river, and usually get rescued by one of the fishermen. but she'd make an attempt to use the river anyway.
I think I live here because of the environment, the natural environment, the fact that this place is like a giant shopping mall for birds is really important, you know. I just like the way that the sort of design of this little community is integrated with what's going on naturally around it, as opposed to being a settlement that's imposed on the environment by trashing the environment first and then building what you want. This little community adjusted itself to the environment rather than the other way around.
When I first moved in here, the building itself was very rickety. It's up on pilings, and it's on what's called mud sills, which are logs that are laid in the bottom on the mud, and then the pilings go on those. So that's the foundation. Now these were like original pilings, and they weren't that sturdy anymore. They'd deteriorated over the years. And in fact, I had a cat and a little 2x4 that ran up into my window up there, and you could feel the house move when the cat came in. So quickly I put some more pilings under it. So it was 15 feet long and 12 feet wide. There was 2 or 3 feet of cool junk in there, no roof, and me and a local guy made some shakes, and I put the shake roof on, and that was in 1979, late 1979, and I have built it up ever since, adding little here and there.
It's practically was wiped out by a developer, but we kind of stood together, and I think they thought they would chase us out by scaring us out, and they did scare a bunch of us, but we did stick together, and it ended up that he chased himself out, which was kind of neat. So
the stresses that I feel are from unknowns. For many, many years, Finn Slough has been a backwater, something nobody took interest in. Very many jurisdictions, so nobody really wanted to take responsibility for it, and that's okay. And that sort of kept everybody happy. And then I guess in 1993, a developer came in and wanted to develop this area, basically dredging the slough, putting in sheet pilings, and creating a condo village with a marina. And well, for one thing, he couldn't do that because this area is red zone. That means it's environmentally sensitive, and that's with us here. It's red zone. We've sort of put up a fight, and that hasn't happened. We've spent quite a lot of money on lawyers' fees and been in talks with the powers that be, and right now everything is in limbo.
Behind of us here is the south arm of the Fraser River, and This is the main freight channel. This is where all the really big boats go by. The large carriers that bring all the Hondas and Toyotas from Japan to Canada come through here, just about 50, 100 yards out there. And this channel, which must be half a mile wide at this point, used to only be a couple of 100 yards wide before the river washed away the 35 acres that used to be here. What's being bought and sold here in terms of the survey of Whitworth Island is still a piece of paper which says 35 acres on it, even though 35 acres doesn't exist. 25 or more acres of what used to be an island, or used to be a potato farm here, is gone. It's underneath there somewhere where the big boats go. There was a time in the early 50s where they were parking the boats three abreast here. There was something like 50 fishing boats working out of this area.
I actually loved fishing spring salmon on the Fraser. It was my dad's thing, and I loved it too. It was a real challenge. And the fin drift was a good producer for spring salmon. I mean, there's other places on the river that probably equally as good, but we didn't lack them there. When springs were running, we got our share. And I loved fishing those springs. I can remember one morning I started, it was a Monday morning at 8 o'clock, and the tide was perfect. It was coming to the low water slack, which is usually about 2.5 hours after low water. And it's an excellent set for spring salmon. And anyway, in that time, I made 3 sets, and at 11 o'clock, the water stopped. And at that time, I had 70 spring salmon, about an 18-pound average. And I was just in my elements. I mean, I was happy. I had an excellent week if I didn't catch another fish. I had made good money. They paid good money at that time, and like I said before, a dollar was a dollar. Some of those fish were hitting right on the cork line where they were splashing water, and I mean, it was exciting. It would just made your adrenaline just very exciting. I just don't know how else to say it. It was just unbelievable. Yeah, I'll never forget that.
For a living, I repair yachts and install systems on yachts. So I work on marine-related things. Whatever it is in a yacht that can go wrong, I can fix it. I'm a partner, and I have been working on this river for many years. I was a tour boat engineer, deckhand, and well, everything but the captain. One day Bill says, well, we need a deckhand today, just for a day, and I was there for 10 years. That was Captain Bill that lives up the Slough here. He gave me my big break on that. We would go up and down this river from Steaston to Harrison Hot Springs in a 60-foot boat with 40 passengers on it. And I did that for about 10 or 12 years. About eight years ago, I started doing the marine maintenance.
There was probably 17 to 24 families. They came and went, and then gradually, as they got older, some people retired. They went to the Finnish Canadian Rest Home. They passed away, until we're down to a very little handful, actually, of Finns. There's only 2 of us, actually, that are down there now.
I don't think Slough has changed very much. in the last 20 years. I think the big change happened in the 70s when all the old Finns died or moved away. And artists and people who were more interested in some kind of eccentric alternative lifestyle moved in to replace them. Well, they bought the buildings from the Finns. I think that's when there was a big change, but since then I don't think there has been very much change at all, except that we've lost buildings because of the ravages of the river and the weather and so on and so forth. I mean, that's probably been the biggest change, actually, is the loss of buildings.
When I moved in 1973, I didn't have to make very much money to live here, and because I couldn't afford to buy presents for people, so I just made wooden toys and gave the kids presents, and then just sort of the toys took off, and they were being sold in stores, and I was selling them at craft fairs, and so I was living on that. Within a year, I was making fairly elaborate wooden vehicles that often had suspension and steering and opening doors and things like that. So they became presentation pieces for like Senator Ed Lawson had a truck, and some went to Kobe, Japan, and some went to Germany. With the encouragement of some friends, took on a shop out in North Delta and set up a shop, had people working for me, and was selling the toys in, I don't know, 50 stores or so across Canada, like the Hudson's Bay Canadiana shop and Woodward's Maple Leaf House and places like that. And but then you were supervising. I like making the first one and the second one or maybe the third one to sort of work out the kinks. But I don't like making the same thing over and over again. So, but then along with it goes all the 2 days out of the month sort of that you do the tax for the provincial government, tax for the federal government, and just the general books. And I don't like that. And it was like, well, what do I like doing? Well, I like making the things myself. So I closed down the little factory and just, I would still make the fancy pieces and sell those in art galleries and craft fairs. And at the same time, I was fixing boats, helping people fix boats, because I'd helped build one and before I got my truck. And so I went off to sail from here to San Francisco on one of the boats, and then a few years later flew down to Mexico and spent 8 months in Mexico fixing a boat. So and I just kind of fell into boats.
The people here are very individualistic, yet they live in a community that's kind of tight-knit. Now, if you went into a high-rise in the West End and asked somebody what his neighbor's name was, I don't think you would find a good answer. They probably wouldn't know. We have been brought together, for one thing, by our little struggle trying to keep this world as it is here down in the Slough. And everybody's friendly. There's all sorts of different personalities here, and we do have conflicts every once in a while, just like anywhere else. It's not unlike a Peyton place sometimes, but people do, they take care of each other. we had a fire down up the slough a little ways, quite a few years ago, and the firemen came in and put tarps over all the furniture so that it wouldn't get wet, and put the fire out and left the tarps and said they'd come back later. Now that was in the morning, and one of the fishermen here, Gus Jacobson, it was his daughter and her husband that lived in the house, and he sort of got things organized, and everybody got together. And by the time the firemen came to pick up their tarps, the roof had been basically reframed and and the plywood was up. All it needed was some new shingles.
Brad Scott moved into the slough and had been here for a few years, and I did a little bit of work on his boat. It was the old Strat 6. And so one day he says, come with me, and we went down to Steveston, and he says, I want to show you my friend's boat. And so we went down and looked at the Kulikai. It was called the Loy Bigor then. And I just got to know the people that owned it. The boat had fallen to disrepair, and he asked me to make it live again. So before you could do anything on the inside or do anything mechanical, you had to stop the water from getting in. Most of the water was coming in from the top. It was rainwater. So I just took everything off the wheelhouse and redid the deck, put everything back, made new, like the wooden mast was rotten, so got an aluminum mast, and made aluminum pedestals for the radars instead of steel ones, which were all rusty and rotten. And then moved down, did the Texas deck the same way, and then the boat deck the same way, and then wrapped the house in epoxy and fiberglass. And then in the winters, when I wasn't working on a house or somebody else's boat, then I would do the inside. And if there wasn't woodwork to do, then I did the mechanical, put a new furnace and hot water system in it. A lot of the radiators had been frozen and had burst, so it had to be completely redone. So I just did whatever was needed.
Bill is he's been in he grew up in BC. He's got quite a history, and he started out on the tugboats in the early days and towing logs and towing barges. He went flying because he learned to fly during the Second World War, and he was a bush pilot, and he became a helicopter pilot, and then he went back to the boats, tugboats and tour boats. I do have an isolated small house in the middle of nature. I can look out and yesterday I saw some sea lions, some stellar sea lions just at the end of the slough fishing. And I can look out, there's all sorts of wildlife, but there's also civilization. There's different levels of people's need for privacy here. We have had people who are just, I don't know what they think. They have come up and thought that they could just walk up and look into your door, you know. I mean, I just to give you an example, I had somebody I heard this noise coming up up my walkway on the side of the house, and I looked up, and I've got a little porthole in my doorway, and there was people looking into that porthole, and I went and I accosted them, and basically they said, "Oh, we're just looking," you know. And a lot of times what I will do is just say, "Well, okay, well, give me your address, and I'll go and see what's in your bedroom."
I'm not sure exactly what visitors think when they come here. I mean, we get so many different kinds of visitors. We get people who come here and they kind of laugh at the place. And we get other people here who sort of almost revere it, you know. It's such a wide range of reactions. But I tend to notice it's a love or hate thing, you know, and you do get people come down here who are making it pretty plain that they hate it. I think I define myself primarily as an artist. I mean, that's how I've always looked at the world, as an artist. It's how I think of myself. Well, that might be changing finally at this late stage into something more towards music, but being an artist and not being a famous, rich artist means you do everything else, which is in my case, all kinds of jobs, but primarily that of construction and renovation, and with occasional interludes of really interesting things like carving jade, which I did in the 70s. That was really interesting and quite fulfilling too, because it was one of the few times where I used my skill as a sculptor to make real money, as opposed to making art that no one wants. Or no one wants to buy, anyway. I stopped carving jade because the market fell apart. It was doing really well until that oil crisis. What was that, 74, 75, something like that? And then it just slowly went downhill to the point where it was almost impossible to sell anything, at least for me anyway. Originally, when we were working on that, there was a huge sales organization, and it was not something we had to do personally. We just had to carve the stuff and make good sculptures, and someone else dealt with all the buying and selling part of it. And that was perfect as an artist. It's always difficult as an artist to be your own salesman. That's what galleries are for. So I'd say the main reason I stopped carving jade was not because I didn't like carving it, but because I couldn't make any money at it, not compared to renovating houses, which is something for which there's always a demand. There were some physical things too, actually. Carving jade is very hard on your hand and wrist joints. And so I was beginning to feel that a bit.
Eva was sort of my favorite boat from the time I first saw it, which was when I moved in here. And I could be laying in bed at night and hear her out fishing with the East Hope and pop, 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 pop. And I thought, oh, one day, I'd love to get that, but I didn't seriously think that I'd ever get it. So in the early 80s, I got into making radio-controlled model boats. So the third model boat I made was the Eva. And so I was doing some planking repairs on her, actually, so it was up on the dry, so I measured her up and came home and did some drawings of for the lines and started making the model. So it took me about 3 months of almost steady work to make the model. And I put in, it was fully radio controlled, would set the net, bring the net back in, and it had the working lights that you could switch from running to fishing, and it had a little electronic chip that would make the sound of the East Hope. And then I got hired to use it at Expo, along with the other boats. So every day at Expo, I would run the model of Eva and the other boats around. And then sort of stuck it on the shelf, and well, especially after the kids were born. So I was sort of sitting here collecting dust. And then one day, in the meantime, Gus had stopped fishing it. Gus Jacobson owned it, and it was parked up in the winter storage and had been for a couple of years, and it was starting to look pretty sad, and it bothered him a lot. So he stopped me on the road one day. It was a nasty rainy day, and he stopped me on the road and said, "Do you still have the model of Eva?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Well, I still have Eva." He says, "Why don't we just trade?"
I had seen his model of the Eva and very much liked it and very much wanted it. So it was a big attraction to me, and I didn't know if Al wanted to part with his model either, because he had done, he told me at one time how many hours, and maybe he's mentioned it here to somebody, but I don't want to say the hours, because it was a horrendous amount of hours that he put into that model. And that is done to scale, identical. Like Al is a master when it comes to figuring something out and putting it together. He's an incredible man. So anyway, I told him, would he consider if we made a trade? The original Eva for his model. Well, I think when I mentioned that, he was ready to do it right then and there. But I said, there's no real rush. I said, I want you to, because I knew the kids liked the model too, and I didn't want to take something away that he might not ever do again. But anyway, I said, you think about it and talk it over with your children, and then we'll go from there. So it wasn't too long afterward that Al came back to me and he said, yes, they would like to make a trade. So trade we did.
There, though, isn't it?
a chunk of root, about so big, floated in at low tide, got jammed between the propeller and the net garter. And when I headed out, I snapped things, shook the engine off the engine beds and the shaft off loose on the coupling. So taking them in to get repaired. Most of the stuff you have to replace is because when you moor it or when you tie it beside the float, all the debris in the river floats or gets blown in between the boat and the float, and the rocking will wear through a plank. Or when there's a big freighter or a fast truck ferry goes up and down, sometimes it'll pick the boat up and just slam it against the float, and it just shatters the ribs behind it and the planks. It was built by Suzuki up in Annis's Slough by Queensboro there. And according to Eva Wagner, who the boat's named after, she was born in 1924, and she remembers painting the name on the bow the day it was being launched in 1937. So the boat's named after her, so she should remember. It was probably built without a drum, because the drums came in later. And but other than that, it's pretty much as original, except that when they upgraded in the 1950s, they had it refitted by Kishi here in Steedston, and they changed the motor from an 812 East Hope to a 1018 East Hope. 1018 is fairly unusual. Most of them are 1014s, but this one is stamped on there 1018, and it revs to 900 RPM, whereas most of them rev to about 750. So it's a modern one.
I had that boat so full of fish, you couldn't get another fish in it. The hatches were full, the stern was full. I had plugs in it so it wouldn't sink. There's fish on the deck. Unreal.
I think that one of the things Finn Slough represents is old BC. You know, when first white settlers were coming into BC, they had to make do. They had to do things whatever way they could so that it worked. It wasn't based on some guy in Ottawa telling them, you've got to do this, that, or the other, because that's what the CMHC tells you, you know. You have to build your house this big. You have to put that many bathrooms in, whatever. People do things so that they work, and that's how this province was settled and built, was by people who did things so that they worked, not according to some set of rules from some other place.
One of the things that we do is pay Richmond a check every year for taxes. Now, they haven't asked us for taxes, but we pay what the tax roll says that this place is supposed to pay. And it's one of the things that people do say is, you know, you're a bunch of squatters and you're not paying taxes, you're not in the system, but we are in the system, and that's one of the things that we have been trying to work up to, and that is getting leases, getting permissions from the different governments to be here.
I haven't talked to many people here about this, just one or two people, about the kind of dreams that you have when you live at the slough. And one of my constant dreams is that you wake up in the morning and the houses have been rearranged by the river. So the guy that used to be in a house next door to you is now somewhere else further down the river. I get those kind of dreams all the time. There's a constant sense of insecurity, of not knowing what to rely on.
One day I was here, and well, my porch, which I hadn't out there, which I hadn't nailed down, was floating, and I just got a tiny little bit of water in the corner of my my living room. And in fact, I got out and I got in my little boat and went to visit some neighbors. And I rode down the path and knocked on my neighbor's door, and I heard this little scream. And well, he didn't know that there was water on the floor when he got out of bed. So the thing is, you have to deal with that. He's since raised his house up another couple of feet.
I wish that you could turn the clock back and have those days over again. But I believe the good times and the best fishing times are all gone. They will never be the same. There's too many different factors in progress and changes in the environment. We've got warm currents, we have pollution, we have many different users, there's new sets of rules, there's rules that some aren't fair, some are. I blame our government for making some of those rules, and then they can't police them. So it's changed the fishing industry totally. It's, I feel that we're on our way out. Sometimes I feel that they don't care about us anymore. I mean, Steeston used to be a town that probably had 24 canneries at one time. And I don't know how many boats. I mean, there was lots and lots of boats in Steeston. I can't even pick a figure, but I mean, there had to be thousands of boats. There was gill netters and trollers and seine boats, and they all made a living. And the little community, there were stores and hotels, and those are gone now. They'll never come back.
The building is, we just call it a net shed. It was a place where you stretched out the fish net and repaired the damage or hung a new net. It was a place you could work in the hot sun in the summer or during the rain and snow in the wintertime. What happened to it is there hasn't been any fishing for a while, or very little fishing for a while, so nobody's put the time or the effort into the upkeep on it. And then near record snowfall, with the last 8 inches being a heavy snow. Despite the efforts of some of the local people here to pull the snow off, the weight just did it in. It just collapsed on itself. 6 have come down since I've been here in the last 35 years. Go into anybody's life, you'll find extraordinary things.